Welcome back to Campaigns and Cantrips, where we share DM tips, D&D actual play reviews, and D&D content and rankings. If this is your kind of content, please like, follow, subscribe, comment, share, engage, and we will be producing more and more content for you guys. On today's episode, we are talking the Campaign 4 characters for Critical Role. Over the past week or so, we've had the emojis drop, and then we had the character art, and then finally yesterday, a behind-the-scenes video of them talking about their characters. So I want to put together today a video of my class and subclass predictions for each of these characters. Now, some of them we do know for sure. Some of them we are not fully confirmed on, but we have an idea, and some we have no idea. So that is where we are starting at today. Now, if you have not seen any of this and you do not want to be spoiled for Campaign 4 in a couple of weeks, please leave this video now, but come back once Campaign 4 airs and check it out and see if I got it right. Starting out with our first piece of character art, we got Travis's Tayor Pridesire, which looks like a lion, and I'm really excited to see the Leone race come into Critical Role. I think it's a great race, and I'm so excited to see what Travis does with it. Now, from the video, we know that he is going to be playing a paladin. So I'm going with that, and I'm going for an Oath of the Crown paladin as my official guess for this. Now, let me tell you why. I looked at this character art, and I saw the purple and the gold, which is very regal and royal and very, well-to-do colors that are normally associated with royalty and things like that. And so I was thinking about what we know from Brendan about this campaign, about not having the gods present in this world. And so I was thinking that that places a very high importance on the actual rulers of the society, of this civilization that has now been created from a lack of gods and rulers and stuff that we see a lot of times in fantasy. And so looking at the Oath of the Crown, they are very much defenders of the law and order and rulership of society and of civilization. And so I think that would be really interesting for a subclass for a paladin, but we'll see. That's my official guess. Could be completely wrong, but we're starting there. Now, moving on to Whitney. And her character Tierney is probably one of my favorite pieces of art. I think it's absolutely beautiful. And when I first looked at these, I kind of just looked at them very quickly, scrolling through because I was going to bed and whatnot. And so I was like, oh, cool, tiefling, probably a caster, no armor, and moved on. When I went back and looked at it more heavily in preparation for this video, I noticed that she has some furbolg features. She's got the floppy ears like we saw with Caduceus, and she's got hooved feet. And so I'm wondering if this is some sort of furbolg tiefling manifestation happening in her body. Like, was she originally a furbolg that has then brought in this tiefling side? Was she always born this way? Was this some deal that, parents made, something like that? I don't know. I think this is going to be a very interesting race. But looking at the class, now we don't have any idea what the class is, at least at this time of recording. But knowing that she doesn't have any armor, that leads me to believe it is a caster class. And so I was looking through just all of the caster class subclasses because nothing was really sticking out to me of like, yes, it is this kind of caster. So I was looking through them and I came across the Lunar Sorcerer. And it made me think of the moons that are on her dress. So you see the moons in the various phases across the breast of her dress. And I was like, this could be a great clue into the fact that she is a lunar sorcerer. And you see a little bit of the kind of sun beam motifs and stuff. We'll talk about that later on. But I don't know, this seems lunar moon vibes. I don't know. The moons on the dress lead me to my official guess of a lunar sorcerer. Now, Murray. I love, love, love this from Marisha. I think this is going to be absolutely fantastic. However, I think Murray is giving me the hardest guess of all of these character arts. And so I started out with maybe a glamour bard. Because this just gives very bard vibes. The pose, the outfit, it's just, I don't know, it's very bard-like to me. But then I went back to the emojis, and it had like the fortune telling ball in that. So my new thought is a divination wizard, but somehow like wrapped in a fortune teller style like esque thing. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but it makes sense in my mind of being a divination wizard that is then doing some sort of not thievery, but trickery with being like a fortune teller, traveler, kind of Harlequin vibe. So that's my official guess. It's a divination wizard. I think it could be really interesting. Some other things that I thought were trickery cleric, but we've seen that with Jester, and I think that's so iconic that I feel like most people will probably stay away from that. And then obviously the glamour bard, I think that could be very interesting. Or an eloquence bard, if we're going down the bard route. I think either of those options would be very good, and I would love to see Marisha play either of those. But I think a divination wizard would be very interesting, I think particularly for this campaign with the West Marches style and knowing what we know about the gods and the pantheon and stuff like that. I think that would be very interesting. But moving on to Taisha. Now, I think people first saw this and were like, oh, warlock, like red, you know, whatever. But then you look closer and you see the leaves in her hand. And we do know from, I think, the behind the scenes video that there was a whiteboard that had it identified that Abria was going to be playing a druid. Now, I think I have two options. Now, one of them is probably more likely than the other, so I'm going to start with that one. And that one is the Circle of the Land Druid. Now, I know that that's kind of seen as a basic druid class, which I think could not be more from the truth, but we know that Abria is great with utilizing different spells and spellcasting very creatively. And the Circle of the Land really gives some great spellcasting options for the druid, rather than going down more of the wild shape, beast shape kind of path that we saw particularly like with Keyleth and stuff. And so I think for Abria as a player, just what I know of Abria and what I have seen from just Critical Role, I think that would be a very interesting like approach for her to take on that. Now, my other option is the Spores Druid, and that is literally only because I love the Spores Druid. There's not really anything in this character art that leads me to believe that. It's just kind of me trying to manifest a Spores Druid in Critical Role. Moving on to Matthew Mercer, and the first thing that I want to say about this character art is that this guy looks like an absolute menace, and I say that in the absolute best way. I am so excited for what Matt is going to bring to the table, and I hope that people are very happy with it when, you know, and not let down by, and I don't think they will be, but I know there's a lot of pressure for Matt being a full-time PC for this and knowing that he's got to bring a good character because he hasn't been able to have a player character for so long. But anyway, I think this is going to be a Blade Singer, and I think that allows Matt to be a little bit martial, a little bit magical, a little bit smart, a little bit charismatic. Like, it's a great mix of a lot of things that you can kind of steer the Blade Singer towards. And so it opens up a lot of options for him role-playing wise, which I think lets him really stretch his wings on this creating a PC option. And I think a Blade Wizard, when done well, can be so, so good. And I think Matt knows the mechanics, knows the way D&D works, knows the way storytelling works, and can make it a really good character. Now, next we have Talison's character, Belair. And Taliesin definitely showed up with some amazing cosplay opportunity, once again, because what else do we expect from Taliesin? And it's also, you know, a little freaky. It's a little scary. And that is just Taliesin. So I think we're definitely looking at a warlock based on the whiteboard that I talked about earlier for Abria. Now, what subclass for warlock? We have no idea, because Taliesin is used to doing homebrew stuff, and I can absolutely see him doing another homebrew a la Brennan, and especially now that they have like Chris Perkins working for them and everything, like creating something really cool as a new subclass specifically for Taliesin in this. I think that would be a really fun thing for Taliesin to do, but also just sticking with what Taliesin likes to do. I think there's definitely some aspect of Pact of the Blade from the Warlock class in this, just based on kind of this mystical blade that they're holding in this picture. And who knows what race, because this mask, or is it even a mask? We don't know. But I think it looks absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to go Warlock of some kind. I cannot even begin to describe a subclass because I think it is going to be a homebrew. So Valeus is next. This is Ashley Johnson's character. And the first thing that I noticed about this was the censer that she was holding. And that automatically gives me like priest vibes, which makes me think cleric. But in her video, talking about her character, she said that the main weapon that she used was a whip. And so I thought back to this character art and I was like, oh my goodness, the censer is basically the whip. Like, she has used the basic D&D mechanics of a whip, just reskinned with the censer. And that's the weapon. And I think that would be totally cool if it happens. I could be absolutely wrong on that, but I think that would be an amazing, like, reskin of a weapon. Now, this is kind of giving Death Cleric vibes just because of all the black and I don't know, it gives the dark Death Cleric vibes, and I love a Death Cleric. I've played with a Death Cleric, albeit shortly, but I've played with a Death Cleric before, and I thought it was one of the best things to play alongside because it was just so different to what your normal cleric that you think of would be, and it had some really great features, and I think Ashley could do really well with some of those. Especially that she knows the cleric already from Pike, but this is such a different version of that. But it's not something absolutely completely different to master. And so if she already comes in having mastered a little bit of the basic class, and then you add on this new subclass to it, I think that would be chef's kiss for Ashley. Now, looking at Alexander Ward's character Octus. Now, I don't really know much about Alexander Ward other than the couple times that he's shown up on other Critical Role streams. So, but I do know his characters are great from what I've seen online. And this character art is absolutely beautiful. The colors in it, the shading in it, the foxes with their little button eyes, amazing. Absolutely love it. And to me, this is giving an alchemist artificer. And what leads me to that is obviously the obvious, like, you know, potion bottles and tools and things that are on their person in the character art. But when you look at the alchemist, one of the ways that the book describes an alchemist artificer is that it is there to give life and to take it away, essentially. And I think that's what's happening with these foxes, that they're creating essentially a type of life within these foxes because they're very patchwork. And so it's almost giving like, you know, creating the Frankenstein monster, but these are really cute foxes, but they're like little patchwork animals. And I think they're absolutely deadly. Do not let these foxes confuse you. They are not the sweetest things, probably. But anyway, I'm going Alchemist Artificer for this. I have a couple of other thoughts that I may like leave maybe in the description about this one, but I think I'm going Alchemist Artificer unless I change my mind between now and posting this video. Now, Robbie Daymond playing Cadigan Vale. And let me just say, Robbie Daymond is an absolute blessing. Like, this is book talk for the girlies right here. But I'm just so happy to have Robbie at the table long term. I thought he brought such great energy. And all of the time that Robbie was on my screen, I was just smiling because I thought he was amazing and fit in so well with the cast, but also within what D&D is and what the storytelling is. And so that's my little ode to Robbie Daymond. But talking about Cadigan specifically, so I think the obvious answer here is a Beastmaster Ranger. And I don't want to overthink this because this is just what that vibe gives to me as Beastmaster Ranger. But I had a little side thought of like, is Cadigan a druid that turns into this wolf companion? Because it's got the same coloring, it's got the same scar over the eye, and it's got this little, you know, spectral magical foot, but it has the same color as the weapon at the end of, like the end of the weapon that Cadigan is holding. And so maybe that has something to do with it, but I think I'm going to not overthink this and just go Beastmaster Ranger. And I have played a Ranger twice, And we need to put some respect on the Ranger. And I think it would be great to see a Ranger, having not seen a Ranger since Vex in Campaign 1, and see how it is with the new 2024 rules and stuff, which have, I think, greatly improved the Ranger from original 5e. But it still has a little bit of ways to go, but I think Brennan and the crew can work out some of those issues where it doesn't scale necessarily as well as some of the other classes. Now, Liam O'Brien as Hallandil Fang. And I think this is the final one that showed on the whiteboard that it was going to be a bard. And this just definitely shows bard to me. And if we're thinking Liam O'Brien, my brain immediately goes to Tragedy Bard, because that is the class that was built for Liam O'Brien. And in the video where they were talking about their characters, I think Sam mentioned something about theater and like ex-spouses or something, and it feeds into this Tragedy Bard option, and I think it would be so good. And I definitely see this character as being like, definitely has some like deep trauma and tragedy, but being very over the top about it to try to hide from the fact that like they're actually feeling it. I don't know, that in my mind that makes sense, and I think that's a fine line that Liam could definitely walk character wise. But I think a Tragedy Bard from Liam would be absolute top tier. And I know a lot of people had guessed that he was going to be a cleric based on, I think he had said in a few interviews earlier on that he wanted to play the 4 like core classes of D&D, of the rogue, the wizard, the fighter, and like the healer or the cleric. And so I think a lot of people were thinking cleric because of that, but I think seeing Liam as a Tragedy Bard would be kind of the only, that's like the one thing that I'm like, yes, I will absolutely accept that, and not go for him finishing that 4 original like types of classes. Now, Luis, I'm so happy to have Luis back. He's a great role player, and he really does some great things mechanically. And so I think because of that, I'm leaning Eldritch Knight on this, just because this very much gives fighter vibes in this, but that little lightning magic bit on the hand going into the weapon, that just kind of screams Eldritch Knight to me, or some sort of magical fighter. And I think an Eldritch Knight, a lot of people, you know, it's a original like player's handbook subclass, but so I think a lot of people overlook it these days. But I think somebody like Luis, who has a great background in D&D, but also is a great role player, will be able to take some of that and really turn it into something interesting and something that people haven't really thought about as just kind of a melee class. So Eldritch Knight is what I'm going with for Luis. Now, Sam's character, Wikander? Who knows? It's Sam Riegel. We don't know. Now, immediately, again, this, I saw no armor on this, so it makes me think spellcaster. And then the motifs that we talked about with tyranny are showing up. These little sunbeam things are showing up, and the colors are very similar in this character. So I don't know if there's any kind of tie between their characters or anything. Is it just, this was a great color, which is a great color? Who knows? I don't know. But then I started thinking like, well, is Sam going to be a lunar sorcerer? And it kind of, it made me think about like, okay, you don't normally do 2 of the same subclasses in the same campaign. Particularly, like, you see some classes that are the same sometimes, like we saw in campaign 2 with the 2 clerics of the Trickery and the Grave, but those are very different clerics. But you don't really see the same subclass, because then it just becomes overlapping of the things that you're good at, somebody else is good at too, and so it doesn't make for the best play. But then I started thinking about, this is a West Marches style campaign, and they are going to be at different tables. And so potentially Sam's Lunar Sorcerer could be at a different table from Whitney's Lunar Sorcerer, and so that could make some really interesting facets of, they do know each other, but they're split up. And we have this sorcerer experiencing, you know, this particular thing, and this sorcerer experiencing this particular thing. But then when they do come together, that makes some very interesting like conflict or dynamic or something like that. So I don't know, part of me is leaning lunar sorcerer, but I think my other guess would maybe be clockwork sorcerer, or clockwork soul, because it does talk about a cosmic force. And I know that's normally like more of like a machination type vibe for clockwork soul. but I think you could reskin it a little bit as more of going from that cosmic force with the moon, with the sun, with those kinds of things that you see in the motifs a bit in this, and make it work for this Sorcerer for Sam. But this one, this one, and I think Marisha's, I'm the most like, I don't know, but these are my guesses. Now, Laura Bailey is going to make us fall in love with Thimble in about 0.2 seconds, because that is what Laura Bailey does, and I'm here for it. And so for this one, I kind of took a different approach for Thimble, and I started thinking about mechanically what would work with this. Now, I think before we had seen this, I think if you would have given us two options of who was going to play a swashbuckler rogue, I think most people would have said Matt or Robbie. But I think Thimble is going to be a swashbuckler rogue. And I will say why. So, number one, they use charisma as some of their features. And I think that Laura likes to play high charisma characters, or at least relatively high charisma characters. And, that's just what she's really good at, and that's what she enjoys, that I feel like. And so, knowing that that is something that can be utilized within that swashbuckler rogue, I think is going to be a positive for her. But also, the 2-weapon swashbuckler rogues are very good with 2-weapon fighting. And you see the 2 sewing needles that she has already. And so I think that may lead us into a bit of swashbuckler rogue territory there. But also, being a fairy and being able to fly makes that fancy footwork feature that swashbuckler rogues get very early on very, very interesting. And so I think I'm taking more of like a mechanical approach to this, based on what she's wearing and the weapons and stuff like that, to come and arrive at that swashbuckler rogue guess. So just a quick recap of everybody's. We've got Thimble as a swashbuckler rogue, Wikander as a lunar sorcerer or maybe a clockwork soul sorcerer, Azun as an eldritch knight, Hallandel as a tragedy bard, Cadigan as a Beastmaster Ranger, Octus as an Alchemist Artificer, Valius or Valeus as a Death Cleric, Belair as some sort of Warlock, Taliesin only knows, Sir Julian as a Blade Singer, Taisha as a Circle of the Land Druid, Murray as a Divination Wizard, Tyranny as a Lunar Sorcerer, and Tayor as an Oath of the Crown Paladin. So let me know if you think I'm right, if I'm wrong. If you have any guesses, please leave them down in the comments, or just let me know what you think about my list. And as always, if you liked this content, please like, subscribe, comment, engage, and we will have more content coming out for you guys in the future.